So far, Games Workshop has brought 3 Primarchs back to the setting and tabletop universe of Warhammer 40k. One shudders to think how profitable the pertaining releases are, and there's little doubt that this trend of returns won't be stopping anytime soon. So why don't we delve into a bit of speculation as to which Primarchs are yet to return, as well as have a look from a more narratively focused perspective at whether certain Primarchs should return. So far, Chaos has Magnus and Mortarion, while the Imperium has Gulliman. The pattern at present is one of alternating between Chaos and Loyalist-aligned demigods, and the common thinking assumes they're gonna continue with that. So let's start with those loyal to the Imperium, and while we're at it, try to ascertain who's most likely to be the next, and the order of releases from there. Alright, for this position I reckon it's either Lionel Johnson or Leman Russ. Both of them are very popular and well known, and both are explicitly alive, so GW don't have to do anything funny with the lore to bring them back. The Dark Angel Codex even directly stated that the Lion is alive and in the rock. They pulled the waiting for the right time to return nonsense. The other is Russ. He's got his own codex force like the Lion, but his hasn't come out yet, so still could have a Primarch in its pages. He's been screwing about in the Eye of Terror for the past 10,000 years, and can narratively come back whenever GW wants him to. Not only that, but he'd both tie into Magnus with that classic rivalry, and with his warp escapades, he could be tied into any sort of battle against Chaos. For instance, one involving another demon Primarch. Of the two, I think Russ is the slightly more likely. I'm pretty confident it'll be one of the two. The only other I could see as having a reasonable chance would be Rogel Dawn. He's got enough popularity and general mass appeal to make sense for an early Primarch release, and his death to some Chaos Space Marines with no body but a dismembered hand recovered is essentially no death at all. He's missing and can be drafted back to tabletop as needed. So after that, let's assume it'll be another Chaos Primarch. The last two were demon Primarchs of monogod dedicated cult legions. This makes a lot of sense. These kinds of single god-centered releases can be tied in with demons and allow the respective legions to be turned into small army lists of their own. And that means we've got two options. It's either Fulgrim or Angron. Both of them are totally free to join the fray from a fluff perspective, so it's a matter of who comes first. On one hand, we've got Angron. Now, he's probably got the wider appeal. Khorne demons are popular and World Eaters are popular. As far as Angron himself, he could be tied in with Orc and even Guard releases with his dealings on the world of Armageddon. Furthermore, he could easily be played against Leman Russ and the Space Wolves if they were to release him and a World Eater line, since both reflect two sides of the savage archetype, one noble and the other, well, much less so. But then we have Fulgrim, who I think is the slightly more likely pick. For one, Slaanesh is the most overdue for a demon and cult legion release. Now, the Berserker miniatures are no doubt a bit outdated, and their line could do with some expansion to bring it up to speed with the Death Guard and Thousand Suns equivalents, but at least they're plastic. As for Slaanesh demons, well, compare Khorne's Greater Demon to Slaanesh's. Not to mention the Age of Sigmar side of things. Khorne's got a whole lot of love there, while Slaanesh was almost squatted, left as a plot thread of maybe we'll come back. That could be an argument for either side, but going by GW's recent behaviour, they seem to be clearing up some of the sins of the old world's annihilation, as well as never missing an opportunity to earn that nostalgia credit and money. Beyond this, Fulgrim is a rival to Gulliman, being the one that KO'd him to begin with, and has been getting hinted at since the Gathering Storm. And past this line, predictions get a little murkier. I reckon the second choices will follow the first ones, but speculating past that point gets into the realm of pure guesswork. Alright, so the Loyalist side is simpler here. Once Rust the Lion and Dawn are out of the way, we can start looking at who else is easily available. That gives us Kharn, Korax, and Vulcan. They're all alive, and though they're not the most marketable, they still can be worked into being presented as heroes for the Imperium at large beyond their respective chapters. The Kharn was off in the webway, so he could be tied into a Dark Eldar conflict and release. Korax is doing something, and though he doesn't have the most obvious opposition beyond Chaos in general, I can see him filling a gap between other releases. And Vulcan is a perpetual, so can be revived whenever they want. He could also be tied into an Orc conflict, but with his involvement in the War of the Beast series being his last big appearance in galactic affairs, I see no reason why all of these Primarchs won't or shouldn't come back at a later point. Now, let's turn to the easier among the Chaos side of things. So, who here isn't dead? He's dead, he's very dead. These two probably aren't dead, but we'll say they're dead for the moment. Okay, that leaves us with Lorgar and Perturabo. And this is where we start running into problems. See, these two are meant to be demon princes of Chaos Undivided. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for a certain super special black snowflake known as Be'lakor. It used to be, back when the stories for what happened to Lorgar and Perty were written, that there were a bunch of demon princes of Chaos Undivided, but then they ported Be'lakor from Warhammer Fantasy, and to hype him up as well as push aside Undivided, they said he was the only Prince of Chaos Undivided. But what of Perturabo, who would never dedicate himself to a single god, or Lorgar, who quite literally wrote the book on Chaos Undivided as a concept? And Games Workshop replied, so, there are two lines of thought on how GW is likely to go about this issue once it comes up. One, retcon the two to be dedicated to a single god each. Common thinking is that Pert goes to Nurgle or Khorne, while King Choirboy gets Tzeentch, Khorne, or maybe Slaanesh. 2. Decide that the already established lore for Primarchs is more important than a certain terribly written pseudo-Mary Sue, and retcon his edgy arse back into irrelevance. The option I favour should be pretty clear. Don't get me wrong, some rusty looking Nurgle Iron Warriors would be pretty rad, but this is bigger. Now, nobody's mourning the loss of, say, Makar to the phasing out of Chaos Undivided, but Lorgar? Now, that's a much more significant thing. Be'lakor has been, shall we say, mismanaged in lore, and quite frankly, I think the best solution at this point is to amputate some of the more egregious parts. First Demon of Chaos Undivided? Sure, fine. The only one ever? No. Lorgar's whole deal is Chaos Undivided. His whole philosophy is based on worshipping all the gods equally. Dedicating him to a specific one would really hurt his character, not merely to the extent of Black Library background retcons that can be ignored. No, there'd be no going back if GW were to bake a retcon like that into a miniature. Perturabo could get away with it. It would suck and would definitely weaken the character, but it wouldn't ruin him. Lorgar though? But I hope GW realises that mangling two characters before releasing models for them wouldn't exactly help sales. I think the reason behind them moving away from Chaos Undivided to start with was because it lacked models, and so didn't make them that much money. It was more useful to put that focus on the gods, who do have model ranges available for purchase. But if Undivided were to have some miniatures for sale, say for instance 2 very big and very expensive centerpiece models, well, I think GW is smart enough to realise that the sanctity of Be'lakor's already messy fluff isn't worth pissing off those who are already fans of the characters and would have been the first to buy new toys otherwise. Alright then, that's all of the officially living Primarchs. GW's been pulling out the stops and delivering on all those prophecies of grand battles to come, and in line with this, I see no reason why all of these characters shouldn't or won't come back over the next few years. So, that's it, right? That's all the Primarchs who aren't dead brought back. They'll stop there, won't they? Well, you see, if it's got this far, then Primarch releases probably haven't stopped meaning massive amounts of money. And do you think something like the grave can stop the wheels of glorious capitalism?
Money on my motherfucking mind. Cut 5 haircuts at the same time. White gold.
Now, this is where things start getting a little uncomfortable, when the finality of death gets washed away in the name of the almighty and great British pound. Let's start where it isn't painful. Alfarius Omegon. Now this one, maybe two, they can get away with. There's Old Law of Gulliman killing one of them, but there was always a little ambiguity as to whether it was really Alfarius. More recently, Black Library have said that Dawn beheaded the Hydra towards the end of the heresy. I haven't read Praetorian of Dawn, where this story originates, but apparently it was very matter-of-fact about things. Alfarius is dead. No ifs, no buts. But this is the Alpha Legion we're talking about. If Black Library is to be trusted, then there's still Omegon, well, one of the twins, who we can assume survived while the other died bearing the name Alfarius, against either Dawn or Gulliman. Beyond that, when has Black Library fluff ever stopped GW from doing anything? If GW wants to release both Alfarius and Omegon, this book wouldn't even slow that truck. Furthermore, the 8th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex even directly references the idea that at least one Alfarius is still kicking, or beheading Vindicare assassins, as the case may be. Frankly, I wouldn't see much wrong with Alfarius returning. That is, unless he already has. I mean, who's really to say that this Alpha Legion Chaos Space Marine hasn't been Alfarius all along? Maybe he's your Alpha Legion Chaos Lord. Maybe he's not even in the Chaos Codex at all. Or maybe he's Rabute Gulliman. Those gold bits on his armor do look pretty swirly, come to think of it. I jest, but I do it for a reason. It highlights the point that releasing an official Alfarius miniature would spoil the mystery and, to an extent, the joke. Just a little bit. The other purpose to the joke was to lighten the mood, because from here on it gets a bit grim. Conrad Kurz and Ferrus Manus are in a pretty similar boat. They're both confirmed dead, and that death is pretty important to their lore. Kurz is a little more flexible. He died to a Calidus assassin, and technically nobody saw him die. But his death is pretty important to his character arc. The implication is that he let himself die. He literally says that his death proves the truth of all he has ever said or done. If after that he didn't actually die, well, As for Ferrus, his death is set in stone. Fulgrim cut off his head. The deed was the last step on Fulgrim's fall from grace. His skull was flayed of flesh and used as audience for Horus's lamentations. Not only is his death absolutely certain, but it's massively important for the character of Fulgrim and for the whole Iron Hands Legion. Now, there is the note of clones. He could theoretically be cloned again like he was by Fulgrim and Fabius, but doing so would really blunt the importance of his death. What can I say? Ferrus Manus was cut down before his time and he was forever young. Nobody's gonna get that reference. His fate should stand, and I hope he and Kurz do not return. Next is Horus. Horus is dead. Totally dead. Killed by the Emperor and his soul deleted from existence. No way he could come back. I mean, clones again, but it's been made pretty clear in the lore and GW's practices that they want Abaddon in the only role Horus could fit. The only way they would want to bring him back would be if they wanted to replace Abaddon, and even then, a return of the arch-traitor would really muddy Big E's fate. So, I don't think Horus should return, nor do I think he will. And finally we have Sanguinius. He was murdered by Horus. In his battle, he put the chink in Horus's armor that perhaps allowed the Emperor to defeat his wayward son. His sacrifice is massively important, not just for the Blood Angels and their successor chapters, but for the whole Imperium. When it comes to the Primarchs, Sanguinius was pretty much the best. Now, another one is likely your favourite, Sanguinius sure isn't mine, but it's pretty much agreed upon that he was the best of them when you try to be objective about things, and he died, sacrificing himself to allow the Emperor's triumph. If Games Workshop were to bring him back, then that sacrifice loses all its meaning. And here's the thing, I'm worried they might. Sanguinius is popular. He's up there with Russ, the Lion, Dawn and Gulliman as one of the most beloved. Not only that, but his sons have their own codex, their own army in which he could fit. If Sanguinius were to return to 40k, that would be very profitable and probably pretty widely celebrated. Sanguinius should not return, perhaps more so than any other Primarch. He should never return. But I fear he might. However, I don't want to leave you on such a dour note. Let's revisit somebody. Remember Dawn? I only touched upon him very briefly. I think we all know that he's not dead and it's only a matter of time till he comes back. Well, remember how the only thing recovered from him was a severed hand? That must mean he's missing a hand, right? I guess that means he'll need a new one when he does inevitably return. Now, he could get some fancy bionic hand, sure, but there's got to be something cooler that could be done. Say, wasn't there another Primarch who had something special about his hands? Perhaps one who we know is dead, who won't be coming back and so doesn't need his very special and unique hands anymore? Now, wouldn't it be convenient if there was such a Primarch who had, how to put it, iron hands? God, I hope they do this.